The Epstein files mention Maddie Ziegler from Dance Mom, so let's talk about Sia's music videos. In the music video, The Greatest, we see a bunch of these in the hallway. We also see a cage. Maddie lets them out. They dance in a circle. All of them were doing this in a circle, and it looks like horns. The camera pans in there, out of her, and we see her in this red room. Then we see all of the dancing in this weird location. At the end, they're all jumping up and down. We see them back to being asleep. And look at the location. She cries with the rainbow tears. This signified that it was a party. At the beginning of the video, it says this. This is Chandelier, which is the first one, which is what they were talking about in the email. Talking about watching her dance. They talk about their pizza party, which we all know what that is. This one is Elastic Heart. Go watch it yourself, but it's her and a dude. It appears to be a bird cage. They look like they don't have any of this, and it's just kind of weird. People do say it's supposed to be father and daughter, but in Cheap Thrills, we see her do this symbol and her tongue out. We also see all of them do it in a line. We also see her walking on the table in Speechless by Eddie Benjamin. The Jello desserts from Yummy look like these. There's other videos of her doing this symbol, this, someone's hands behind. There's also this one, symbol on the car. We also see she performed on Ellen, which everybody knows about Ellen, and teaching Jimmy Kimmel how to dance. They say Sia saved her from going on a plane with Harvey Weinstein. Some people said their relationship was weird, and some people said that she saved her. I know she wanted to do these things, but it also could have made her a target. And I am really hoping that nothing ever happened to her.
I watched this movie when I was 9 years old, and it really traumatized me because it's about a woman who hits a man with her car late one night, and she hits him with such force that he gets lodged in her windshield. He gets seriously injured, but miraculously, he is still alive. But instead of calling 911, she just drives home, parks her car in her garage with him still lodged inside the windshield, and then just leaves him there to die. Like he was trapped for hours, literally slowly dying. That on its own is incredibly disturbing, but what's even crazier is that this was actually based on a true story. And the true story is far more disturbing than the movie, if that's even possible. So let's talk about it. So the real case that inspired this movie is about this woman right here. This is Shantae Jawan Mallard. In 2001, she was living in Fort Worth, Texas, and at 25 years old, she seemed to have her life figured out. She was a certified nursing assistant, and everyone who knew her said she was a model citizen. But on October 26, 2001, she would murder a man in cold blood, and she almost got away with it. So that night, Shantae was at a bar/club in downtown Fort Worth. As the night progressed, she drank some alcohol and indulged in some other drugs. And at around 2 a.m. when the bar closed, she decided to head home. This is when she made her first mistake, which was getting behind the wheel really intoxicated. But as she was driving down Freeway 287, she hit something. And it was clear right away what it was, because a man's entire body came crashing over the hood of her car and smashed through her windshield. She hit this man with such force that he actually became lodged in her windshield, unable to get out. This man was 37-year-old Gregory Glenn Biggs. He was a self-employed bricklayer, but at the time he was hit, he was down on his luck and was sadly homeless. So at first glance, Shantae thought that Gregory was immediately dead, but despite being critically injured, he was actually miraculously still alive. This is where the story takes a disturbing turn though, because instead of calling 911 or trying to get Gregory any form of medical help, she drove straight home. She passed a fire station and was even a CNA herself, so she could have helped him many times, but she didn't. Instead, she parked her car in her garage with him still lodged in the windshield, went inside, and shut the door, leaving him to slowly die. Over the next few hours, Shantae would go in and out of her garage, checking on him, even apologizing to him, but she never once helped him. Meanwhile, Gregory was still alive, fighting for his life and pleading for help. He even left his bloody fingerprints inside her car because he was trying to pull himself out, which proved to be impossible. Poor Gregory laid there for as long as he could, which this went on for hours, with Shantae coming in and out to check on him, but eventually he died from his injuries. After he died, Shantae panicked, but still, instead of calling the police, she called one of her friends and said she needed help. She told her friend what happened, and this friend later said that she honestly didn't believe it until she came over and saw Gregory's body in Shantae's car. I guess this friend urged Shantae to call the police, but she refused, so the two just drove around for a while to calm Shantae's nerves. This is super frustrating, but the friend eventually just dropped Shantae back off at her house, fully knowing she just committed murder, and she still didn't bother calling the police. So now Shantae is back at her house. This is when she called one of her on-again, off-again lovers named Vaughn, and she tells him what happened. So Vaughn and his cousin then came over, and they all talked about how to dispose of the body and destroy the crime scene. Shantae and Vaughn wanted to burn Gregory's body and Shantae's car, but his cousin refused to do that. Instead, the two men wrapped Gregory up in a blanket and then dumped his body at the nearby Cobb Park. She then partially lit her car on fire, thinking she destroyed all the evidence, but luckily she didn't. So the next morning at around 9:30 a.m., an off-duty firefighter was walking through Cobb Park when he stumbled across Gregory's body. body, which was badly contorted. His left foot was laying across his stomach, and his entire body was covered in shards of glass. This at first seemed to be just a simple hit-and-run case, which is still awful by the way. But then authorities, who were later called to the scene, noticed that he appeared to have been dead for at least a few hours. They then found that this body belonged to Gregory Glenn Biggs. As they investigated this crime, they got to learn who Gregory was. He was divorced and had been living in a shelter at the time he was killed. He was a really hard worker, but he'd just been down on his luck, and he had also selflessly given the last of his money to one of his friends who needed to buy a car. Gregory struggled with bipolar and schizophrenia, but he was still very much a great person and a loving and present dad to a 17-year-old son. So when his family found out what had happened to him, they were all obviously heartbroken. In the days and weeks following his murder, authorities tried looking for the vehicle that hit him, thinking maybe it was serviced by a mechanic or even from a tow truck driver. But ultimately, they found nothing, and Shantae almost got away with this perfect crime she almost pulled off. She went about her life as if nothing had ever happened. Like literally just days after she killed Gregory, she was caught on surveillance footage at the same bar that she was at the night she killed him. It just really appeared that she didn't care at all. It wasn't until 4 months later when she was at a party that she got cocky and started blabbing. She told some people at the party what had happened, and kind of bragged how Gregory was still alive and lodged in her windshield when she left him to die in her garage. This is when someone at the party connected the dots that this actually did happen, and they later called the police to turn Shantae in. When police interviewed Shantae, she was quick to confess, and when police searched her home, they found her car still parked in the garage, and it was very obviously damaged. It still had Gregory's blood and hair stuck in the front of the car, despite her attempt to destroy the evidence. Needless to say, Shantae was quickly arrested, and at her 2003 trial, she admitted her guilt to everyone, including Gregory's family. But it was proven that Gregory was still alive for some time, and she specifically prevented him from getting medical attention. It also came to light that based on his injuries, Gregory would have survived had she just helped him instead of letting him slowly die like that. She was ultimately found guilty of murder and tampering with evidence, and she was sentenced to 60 years in prison. She's due to be released in 2052, but she's actually eligible for parole next year, which is crazy. Her helpers, Vaughn and his cousin, also pleaded guilty to tampering with evidence, and they both also got 10 years in prison. I get never knowing what you do in extreme situations like this, but this was just cruel. Gregory did not deserve that in the least. So that's the disturbing case that inspired this 2007 movie called Stuck. I was way too young to watch that in the first place, but add in the fact that it's based on a true story, and it's just horrifying.
I've been doing these strange Zillow listings for many years now, and not a single one of them could have prepared me for this place. We've seen hoarder homes, homes that look like they belong to serial killers, with decomp stains, natural springs in the basement, and a cave in the backyard. I could give you 100 guesses, and you would never be able to tell me what you think is in this home's basement. Also, a quick thank you to my friend Susan for sending me this. So this is a 3-bed, 2-bath home for sale right now in Wisconsin for $1 million. Now, you might be asking, why $1 million? It has less than 3,000 square feet. Well, the answer lies in the basement. Here's what you see when you step inside. It's definitely a unique space, but also very ordinary. Here is what one of the bedrooms look like. Here's one of the bathrooms. And underneath all of this, you have this. Yeah, a full-sized, fully functional theater. The property's description gives us a little bit more information about this space. Not only is it a fully operational theater with more than 50 seats and a balcony with even more seating, but it also has the largest Wurlitzer pipe organ made in its day. The fact that you could easily drive by this place and have absolutely no idea that this is what is hiding underneath it, insane.
He killed his pregnant wife, who was 1 week away from giving birth, so he could be with his mistress. Belinda Temple had a twin sister and 3 older brothers. She grew up in a really happy family and had a very happy childhood. Growing up, she loved sports, she loved people, she loved life, and she knew that one day she wanted to grow up and be a teacher and be a mom and have lots of kids. While attending university, Belinda met David Temple. When they met, there was an instant connection and they quickly started dating. Now let's talk about David. Growing up, David was that kind of kid that could get away with anything. You know the type. He came from this small town in Texas where high school football meant everything, and he was the high school football star. He was honestly like an 80s movie stereotype. He was the popular football star who was also a huge bully and got special treatment from all the adults in his life, like his teachers, his parents, like he could literally get away with murder. David dreamed of going to the NFL, but that did not happen. At college, David and Belinda were seen as like this golden power couple. They both loved sports. They both were going to be educators. But Belinda's friends and family had some serious issues with David. They saw a lot of red flags. Belinda's personality changed while she was with David. She was always this bold person, this outspoken person who didn't take anyone's shit. But with David, she became more submissive. David began controlling everything she did, and he slowly started to isolate her from her friends and family. And the two were married in 1992 before they even graduated college. After school, they both moved back to David's hometown where they both took teaching jobs at different schools. David was an assistant football coach and Belinda was a special education teacher and also a basketball coach. In 1995, they welcomed their first child, a son named Evan. And Belinda at this point was absolutely over the moon. She thought that she had this perfect life, this perfect marriage and perfect family. But that was not the case. Her husband was living a double life. At the school that David worked for, he would take off his wedding ring every single day before work, and he never mentioned his wife or son. So everyone just assumed that he was single, including his coworker, Heather Scott. Heather and David began dating, and this was actually really known throughout the school that they worked for. Like, it wasn't a secret. And Heather at this point did not know that her boyfriend had a wife and baby at home. And at home, David began treating his wife Belinda differently. He was treating her terribly. Even after they found out that they were going to have a second child together. Belinda was pregnant with a daughter they were going to name Erin. She was pregnant, and David would call her fat, even in front of other people. He never went to a single doctor's appointment. Belinda set up the baby's nursery all by herself, and David was just mean and distant. At one point, David actually went literally weeks without speaking a single word to his pregnant wife. And Belinda has no idea what happened, what's going on. She started to blame herself like she did something wrong. David was just more interested in the affair that he was having with his coworker Heather. And at one point, Heather did find out that her boyfriend David had a pregnant wife. She wanted David, so she was thinking about ending the affair unless he left her. That Christmas 1998, David did not get his pregnant wife who was 8 months pregnant, a single Christmas present. But he got his mistress, Heather, a gold necklace. His pregnant wife, Belinda's birthday was 5 days after Christmas, and he didn't get her anything then either. And then the day after Belinda's birthday was actually New Year's Eve, and that just so happened to fall on a weekend. So David told his wife that he was going to be spending that holiday weekend away on a hunting trip with the guys, but he was really with his mistress the entire weekend, going out to clubs, bars, and partying. Belinda was home with their son, Evan. She was at this point like nearly 9 months pregnant. She was about to give birth. She could have given birth literally at any point during that weekend, and she was just sitting home alone, devastated, wondering what has happened to her marriage. On January 11th, 1999, less than 2 weeks later, Belinda was about 1 week away from giving birth. David was angry that day because he had to leave work early to go pick up their son Evan from daycare because he was really sick with a high fever. David claims that his wife Belinda came home from work around 4 p.m. and she was exhausted, so she went to go lay down. And to give her time to lay down, David claims that he took their son Evan out to run some errands and then to run to the park, and they were seen on surveillance camera doing that. When they got home about an hour and a half later, David said that he saw that their glass door had been smashed, like someone broke in. He took his son to the neighbors and then ran inside his house to go check on his wife, and his pregnant wife, Belinda Temple, was tragically murdered inside. When officers arrived at the scene, they found Belinda Temple lying face down in her closet. Blood was everywhere. Her and her unborn daughter, Erin, were dead. Belinda had been shot in the back of the head with a large 12-gauge shotgun that was placed directly to the back of her head, and she was shot while she was on her knees, so she was killed execution style, which is just absolutely brutal. This is a pregnant woman. She's a mother. She's a teacher. Like, how could someone be so evil? The scene at first glance looked like it could have possibly been a break-in robbery gone wrong, but the closer they actually looked, the more it looked like it was staged. Not only was it in the middle of the day in broad daylight, which is not common for robberies, but the weapon was also really large, which is also not common in robberies. But the glass door that was smashed, likely smashed so that the intruder could gain entry into the home, well, the glass door was smashed while the door was open, which doesn't make sense. Why would you smash it while it was open if you need to smash it to open it? You know what I mean? The home was an absolute wreck. Things were thrown everywhere. Every single drawer and cabinet was open, but nothing was actually stolen. Belinda's purse and wallet were on the counter untouched. They had expensive jewelry just laying out in the bedroom, which was left untouched. And on top of that, Belinda's husband, David, was acting odd. He wasn't acting shocked or sad. He just lost his wife and unborn daughter, and he was only angry because the police wanted him to come down and make like an official statement and ask a few questions. And Belinda's husband, David, started to immediately look like a person of interest. When he called 911, he told the 911 operator that he was going to check his wife for a pulse, but he didn't have any blood on him, and the scene was absolutely bloody. Like, he would have had some blood on him. The family also had a dog that was really aggressive towards strangers. It was pretty much aggressive towards anyone that was not family. Like, when police first arrived at the scene, they couldn't even enter the home because of this dog. So this dog would have absolutely scared off an intruder. The only living person that dog wouldn't have attacked was David. But David said that he had an alibi because he was running errands with his son Evan at the time that his wife was killed, which was seen on CCTV. But even his alibi looked staged. For one thing, why was he taking his son Evan to the park and to run errands when Evan was extremely sick that day with a high fever that he had to go home from daycare early? But Belinda's time of death was actually confirmed to be like as soon as she got home from work around 4 p.m., which would be a time that Belinda's husband and son would both been at home. And this was also corroborated by neighbors that heard gunshots at the time that David and Evan would have still been home. But unfortunately, there wasn't any slam dunk evidence against David to actually arrest him for Belinda's murder, so her murder went unsolved for years. And with his pregnant wife out of the picture, David married his mistress Heather, and together they raised Belinda's son Evan. 6 long years later, they finally arrested Belinda's husband David for her murder, and their theory was that he killed his pregnant wife because he wanted to be with his mistress and he just didn't want to get a divorce, which I just will never understand. And of course, David pled not guilty, but in 2007, he was found guilty of murder and he was sentenced to life in prison, but that is sadly not the end of the case. After his conviction, evidence of another possible suspect emerged that the prosecution might have buried during the first trial. So in 2016, David's murder conviction was actually overturned and he was released pending a retrial. That new trial began in 2019. By then, David's second wife and former mistress Heather divorced him, which did not look good for him. And a second jury found David guilty of Belinda Temple's murder for a second time, but sadly they could not agree on a sentence, so this was declared a mistrial. They had a sentencing hearing for David Temple, and then 2023, 24 years after Belinda and her unborn daughter Erin were murdered, David was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. He tried to appeal his sentence again in July of 2025, but he lost his appeal. David continues to plead his innocence. He feels really bad for himself, and surprising or maybe not surprising to you, David and Belinda's son Evan stands by his father David, and he believes his father is innocent.
They said it was a miracle he was found alive after 8 years, but not everyone agreed. It was March 2015 in Houston, Texas, when a 17-year-old boy just vanished. Rudy Farias had literally just gone out to walk his dogs and just never came home. His mum, Janie Santana, called police and was like, "My son's vanished. I'm really worried. This isn't like him at all." And it was awful because the family had already had the most devastating time that you could imagine. A year earlier, Rudy's dad, a police officer, had unalived himself out of the blue, and Rudy was only a child having to process the fact that his dad had died. Before that tragedy, back in 2011, Rudy's half-brother was killed in a motorbike accident. Like, just so much for that poor family to deal with. And now Rudy was missing. So time ticked on and on and on, and there was just absolutely no news about Rudy. It honestly seemed like he'd vanished into thin air. For 8 years, there was absolutely nothing until the 29th of June 2023, when he was found lying on the ground outside a church. Now, the missing man, I was going to say boy, but obviously by this point he was like 25, was rushed to hospital and got the medical attention that he needed. He was said to be originally completely mute, but the situation got even weirder when he started to talk. Turned out he'd actually returned home after being missing for just 1 day, and he was made by his mum to just keep his mouth shut and still pretend to be missing. Honestly, so bizarre, like Shannon Matthews 2.0. I did a podcast episode about that case, and it's just wild. Now, the mum initially stuck to her story, and she was like, no, he has been gone all of these 8 years. She was like, he's in hospital, he's getting the urgent care that he needs, he's obviously been through some trauma. But it turned out he was actually at the house and fine the whole time, other than obviously being brainwashed by his mum. He said, although he wasn't chained up or anything like that, he'd been made to sleep in his mum's bed and hide whenever there were visitors round. She'd apparently even made a bunch of money off a GoFundMe from Good Samaritans that were trying to donate to help her find her son, who wasn't even missing. Now, people apparently even occasionally saw him. Like, neighbors thought that they'd seen Rudy a couple of times, but the mum would always just pass it off as like, no, that's my nephew, they look very similar. But bizarrely, the mum did not face any criminal charges. Like, as far as I can see, she just carried on living her normal life, and people were enraged. What do you think about it? Because that feels so odd to me.
Have you guys seen this video going around TikTok? Madison Shemitz is her name, and she's an exceptional human being in every and any way. As is her mom. Her mom was a victim too. Her mom got hurt too, all at the hands of a boy who was too resentful to accept that Madison did not want to be his girlfriend. Madison Shemitz is one of 5 children to her mom, Jackie, and that family is incredibly close-knit. Jackie has always been very supportive and protective of her children. When she was little, Madison earned the nickname Sass from her 5 siblings, but everyone who has described her has said that she was always smiling. She is always smiling, positive, and very determined. She was in high school when this happened, and her life changed forever when she was only a senior. At that time in her life, by all accounts, she was a normal teenager living a normal teenager life surrounded by people who love her. In comes in a boy named Spencer Pearson into her life, a high school football player at her school. Madison and Spencer hit it off, started spending more and more time with each other until they eventually became boyfriend and girlfriend. But it took months, maybe even weeks, for Madison to realize that Spencer was bad news. By the sounds of it, he wasn't only immature and selfish, he was also very, very angry inside. Clearly had a lot of psychological issues going on in his head that he never addressed. Controlling, jealous, mean, all of the things. Madison said that being in a relationship with him made her feel suffocated, trapped, manipulated, and controlled. Their relationship barely lasted 6 months before she wanted out. She knew that she didn't want or need that kind of toxicity in her life. So she broke up with him, but breaking up with Spencer wasn't the end. It was really only the beginning of a living nightmare. By April 4th of 2023, not even 24 hours after their breakup, Spencer was already losing it. And he began flat out stalking her. He was doing anything possible, anything in his power to inconvenience Madison, not only to bother her, but also to scare her. He left notes on her car, he followed her around, created fake social media pages to communicate with her. It got to the point that by May, Madison and her mom were looking into what it would look like to get a restraining order against him, because he was showing up everywhere that Madison was with this like evil, dark look in his eyes. At one point, Jackie reached out to Spencer's mom saying, look, something is wrong with your son. He's really scaring my daughter. He needs to leave her alone, and he also probably needs some sort of help dealing with the issues that he has. And Spencer's mental health was alarming. He was even hospitalized for 5 days post-breakup because he was clearly unwell. Yet after he was released, he just went right back to stalking Madison. June 3rd of 2023 was a Saturday. That day, Madison had hung out with one of her friends at the beach, and afterwards, they decided they want to get something to eat. And that day, Madison just had a weird gut feeling, like something was off. She kind of felt something bad coming on. And I hate to say it, but she was right. But because she was feeling so uneasy, both Madison and her friend asked their moms to join them for lunch. And they all met up at Mr. Chubby's Wings. They chose a table, ordered food, and they were sitting down to enjoy their meal when she saw him. When Madison first showed up at Chubby's, she was looking around trying to see if she could find Spencer, because by that point, it was routine almost. She was constantly walking on eggshells, looking over her shoulder because he was always there. She didn't see him, so they ordered, sat down to eat, and they didn't know it yet, but Spencer was about to walk right past them on purpose to make his presence known, which is so scary that 2 moms being there, one of them being Madison's mom, who was literally sitting right next to her. That didn't stop Spencer. He wanted all 4 of them to see that he was there. Immediately, the 4 of them said, said, no, we're not doing this. They informed the restaurant about the whole situation, kind of just looping them in, and then they got up and they walked out. Madison later said, quote, never in a million years did I think I would never end up making it to my car, end quote. Surveillance footage captured what happened next. As Madison was walking towards her car, she heard a deafening scream behind her coming from her mom. She was trying to warn her. Spencer Pearson had sprinted out of the restaurant and was running full speed at Madison in front of everyone in daylight in the parking lot. He sprinted to her until he reached her, and then he started stabbing her 17 times. He stabbed Madison 17 times. And the only reason why he stopped was because Madison's mom, Jackie, had sprinted over to stop him, and he had turned his attention onto her and began stabbing her as well. Madison would later recount remembering every single second of those horrific moments, the terror of seeing him running towards her, falling to the ground, and feeling every single injury. All 17 to her body, to her chest, to her arms, to her back. She felt everything until she didn't, because then she lost feeling from her legs down, and that terrified her. So like I said, without hesitation, without even thinking of her own safety, her mom had thrown herself at Spencer, pulling him off Madison. He stabbed her too, in the forehead, hand, and leg. The muscles in her hands were severed from the bone because of the injuries. Across the parking lot, a 22-year-old man called Kennedy Armstrong had just pulled into the parking lot with a friend when he heard the screams, and Kennedy, without hesitating, ran as fast as he could across the parking lot to pull Spencer away and tackle him to the ground. In the middle of the struggle, he was also stabbed in the hand, the wound severing an artery and causing nerve damage, but that random stranger running over to help saved not only Madison's life, but probably her mom's as well. Think about how much worse this could have ended if Kennedy had not been a hero and put himself in danger in order to help, and also if Jackie wouldn't have intervened. A flood of 911 calls were made by everyone who was witnessing the horrific crime scene, and first responders arrived as soon as they could. Madison was rushed into emergency surgery at Memorial Hospital in Jacksonville. She had 2 chest tubes inserted, and doctors worked frantically to save her life. Her mom was also taken into surgery. Madison was paralyzed from the chest down, and she knew it. She knew it when she was lying down on the floor outside in the parking lot in the crime scene when she could not feel her legs, and she knew it now when she was lying in the hospital bed, unable to feel anything. The doctors told her that she might not ever walk again, but lying in that hospital bed, Madison made herself a promise that she would walk again, that she would walk at graduation, and that she would eventually walk into that courtroom to face him. Throughout the following months, Madison spent a lot of time at the Brooks Rehabilitation Center in Jacksonville, undergoing both PT and OT, and the fight in her was so inspiring, not only to her doctors, her therapists, everyone around her, but also to other patients, other victims. She was working so hard because she had a promise to keep to herself. This is a quote from her therapist, quote, no matter what I ask her to do, she is willing and ready to put in the work for it. Whether she's tired, emotionally, physically, she's still just, sure, Sydney, let's go, let's do it. Phenomenal work ethic, phenomenal character. On June 1st of 2024, just under 1 year after the attack, Madison Shemitz walked across the stage at the UNF Arena to receive her high school diploma. She got a standing ovation, students, teachers, families, staff, all rising to their feet and clapping for her, many of them with tears in their eyes. I guarantee that moment is one that she will hold in her heart for the rest of her life. But she wasn't done because she still needed to face Spencer Pearson, and as hard as it was, she knew that it was something that she had to do. The first time Madison spoke publicly about her story, this is what she said, quote, as many of you or all of you know, last summer, my entire world came to a stop. On Saturday, June 3rd, 2023, I was the victim of a violent crime that left me paralyzed from the chest down. When I was at my lowest, you all were there providing comfort and support and expertise that ultimately saved my life, end quote. I don't think a day went by in those 538 days plus of recovery in which Madison didn't thank everyone around her for all of the love and support that she was receiving. Their community really came together, really gathered to cheer her on. It was really beautiful to see. Spencer Pearson was arrested and charged with 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder and 1 count of aggravated battery causing serious bodily injury. On June 10th of 2024, he changed his plea from not guilty to guilty, and on November 22nd of 2024, 538 days after the attack, Madison walked into that courtroom with a cane. She walked over to the witness stand and she told her story. She spoke in detail about the trauma that she began enduring, not only beginning June 3rd, but during her relationship with Steven and the stalking that followed after the breakup. She described the 538 days of torment, of constantly reliving the attack, of the nightmares that she would have night after night after night. But she also talked about how she wasn't going to let this define her. She talked about her friends and family and how thankful she was for them. She thanked all of her doctors and her PT and OT therapists, and she said a big thank you to both her mom and Kennedy for being the heroes that saved her life. 20-year-old Spencer was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Kennedy has become like family to Madison and Jackie, and that makes me so happy to say. All three of them have obviously created this strong bond between them, and they care so deeply for each other. Madison is now in college. She's attending Florida Atlantic University, and she is pursuing a degree in criminal justice with a minor in social welfare.